we're going to talk about what person on this team, and I'm going to go last, but we're going to talk about what person on this team has the most to prove. We'll start with you, Sam.
Oh, put me on the spot right away. I don't want to say Kirk Cousins. I think Kirk Cousins is too easy of an answer. I don't even want to say Justin Jefferson. I mean, I feel like Justin Jefferson sort of has staked like what he wants to prove, and it's lofty, and we've talked about it so much. But I'm looking at Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook was Mike Zimmer's guy. Dalvin Cook was beloved by that head coach. And there are very few head coaches in the league, I think, that love their running back like Mike Zimmer loved Dalvin Cook. There's a real bromance going on. Mike Zimmer had Dalvin Cook's back through injury. He had Dalvin Cook's back through his legal difficulties. So if there's anyone in that locker room who might have kind of not wanted to see Zimmer go, it'd be Dalvin Cook. Why not? I mean, you're moving from a run-first offense now to a pass-first offense with a guy who's been part of a team that rotated running backs, had a running back by committee in L.A. So Dalvin's contract was not extended in this offseason. They didn't kick any money down the road. So I think he's still kind of sitting in that spot where he's maybe a little skeptical. Am I really going to get the same amount of work that I used to? So if Dalvin Cook goes into this season motivated, trying to prove himself that he still is valuable to this coaching staff, I think he's trying to set himself up to be with this team for many years to come. I think that when running backs start approaching that 30 number, that age 30 number, you start to worry a little bit about their decline. Dalvin's 27. If he, has some injuries, if he loses his production, then the new coaching staff might say, well, you're at that stage, man. You're, damaged goods at this point. So I think Dalvin Cook actually has a lot to prove to this new staff that, hey, just because I'm a running back, I'm not a receiver, I'm not part of the passing game, I still have value.
Reggie.
Maybe this is a little off the beaten path, but I think Luke and I talked about this a while back, but I think I go Garrett Bradbury just because he was not given that option. He's basically playing for a contract, whether it's with the Vikings or with another team. He's a first-round draft pick. Hasn't really lived up to the expectations that I think they drafted him for. And he's got a lot to prove with this new coach who touted the offensive line as one of the reasons why, for better or for worse, I guess, one of the reasons why he was intrigued by this team and coming over to take over as head coach for the Vikings. And look, he's been steady. He's been solid, but I think it's very telling when a team doesn't want to extend to you. They feel like you have something to prove. So when the team feels like you have something to prove, I think in essence, you feel like you have something to prove. And I think he's going to be going out there trying to maul everybody, just run everybody over. When Christian Darrisaw got drafted last year, he was like, Kirk, nobody's touching him. And I think Bradbury needs to have that same mindset coming into the season. Nobody's touching Kirk. If I got to open up a lane for Dalvin to run, if Sam says Dalvin has the most to prove, I'm going to help Dalvin's cause as well. So I think that's the guy for me. If I had a 1A, 1B, I think 1B would probably be Irv Smith coming off that injury from last year where he missed all of last year. We saw Johnny Munt making a play yesterday, but I don't think they're really counting on him to be like that receiving threat as they are with Irv Smith. And so I think he's tight end one. He's really the only, if you want to be real about it. And I think 1A is Bradbury, 1B is Smith. And, Cousins likes to throw to the tight ends. We saw his production with Conklin last year. And so I think he's going to be looking at Irv Smith a lot this season.
Dang, Luke. Well, I mean, he took two from you, so it's up to you now.
Is there anybody left here? No, I got to stick with Reggie. We did talk about this last week on the show, and I think in the NFL, the cliche is true. You're only as good as your weakest link, and Garrett Bradbury was the 31st ranked center in the league last year. That's just not going to cut it. And I think when you look at what Kirk Cousins does and doesn't do well, he doesn't create plays outside the pocket. He needs that clean pocket. We know that. And I think this KOC offensive explosion could be dead before it even starts. if they don't get that center position figured out. Irv Smith's another good one, both from a personal level. He needs to go out there and prove he can play a full 16, 17 game slate. He's ended on the IR 2 years in a row. And then from a team perspective as well, there may be no bigger drop off from the starter to the second depth piece when it comes to tight end. Reggie kind of touched on it. You're looking at guys like Zach Davidson, Johnny Munt, Nick Muse, a 7th round rookie. I'll throw out one other one, getting deep in the weeds. How about Christian Darrisaw? We don't talk about him a lot, and he did flash a little bit last year after he came back from injury, but I don't think it's safe to just assume, just because he was drafted in the first round and he flashed a little bit, that he's going to be this cornerstone at left tackle. He still needs to go out there in camp and preseason and prove that he's the guy, and certainly he's going to get every opportunity to do so, and I think he can do it for sure. There's a reason he was drafted in the first round, but I still think Christian Darrisaw does have quietly a lot of pressure on his second year coming into this training camp.
Well, I like it. I mean, Luke's got one, Sam's got one, Reggie's got 5. Since Reggie broke the rules, I'm breaking the rules. Like, it said who has the most approved, not Kirk Cousins. I'm going with Kirk Cousins. Like, Kirk Cousins has the most approved. I don't care if we're not supposed to go with Kirk Cousins. I'm going with Kirk Cousins because he has the most approved. I'm paying off the tease. I told you at the beginning of the show, this is why. Kirk Cousins now has an offensive-minded head coach. Every single player I've talked to, Adam Thielen, we had on the show. I've talked to Irv Smith. I mean, when you look at all these other players, who else did we talk? We talked to Ryan Clark. Everybody is talking about Kevin O'Connell and this Sean McVay type of offense, and the fact that we're not going to go full-blown Rams, which means there's a lot of Rams injected into their veins. Kirk Cousins has the most to prove because the Lions did something that nobody thought they would do, traded their franchise quarterback that they had raised for 12 years. He goes on, or 11 years, whatever it was, or 10 years. He goes on to the Rams and wins a Super Bowl in the first year. Yes, they added some pieces like Weddle, and they had Ndamukong Suh, or I think they had Suh or somebody. Aaron Donald and Von Miller, sorry. And so when you think about who they had, all these players they've added, all the defensive pieces they've added, the Jalen Ramsey, I mean, they became one of the top teams in the NFL from a talent standpoint. Then they got Odell Beckham. That's an embarrassment of riches. And then, which is so weird, Robert Woods tears his knee up. So you go from like all these ups and downs, and at the end of the day, they end up winning the Super Bowl. So Kirk Cousins, because now everybody said Mike Zimmer's holding him back. Everybody said Mike Zimmer doesn't trust him. Everybody said Mike Zimmer and Kirk Cousins don't get along. We saw Everson Griffin tweeted out. Kirk Cousins has the most to prove, along with Kevin O'Connell. I think Kevin O'Connell, I'm not going to say we're putting him on this list, but Kevin O'Connell has a lot to prove. He has to prove that he's worth it, that he's the reason that the Vikings got him in.